Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the June My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. I just showed you a couple of the papers I'm going to be using on this layout. I'm going to have a mixed media background, and then I'm going to use the pattern papers and the embellishments and layer those on top of my mixed media. In the center of the layout, I have some strips of pattern paper. The one that's all the way to the left, that one is a branding strip. I cut the strips so that they're all slightly different widths, and then I also cut them in slightly different lengths. The brown strip down the center, that widest one, that's the longest one, and then I'm going to stagger all of the rest of the strips of paper around that larger piece. I first ink the edges of all of the strips with some distress ink in Vintage Photo. Next, I'm going to figure out exactly how I want to layer them, and then I'm going to attach them together. Now, this is a time where I want to make sure that all of the strips are straight. There have been several times where I've used strips of paper on my page and then realized later on that they weren't correctly aligned, and then that causes such a big problem at the end of the layout trying to fix them when I have lots of embellishments and other things layered on top of them. I'll often use my T-square for that. In this case, I have the lines that are on the We Are Memory Keepers mat, and those helped me to make sure that all of the strips were lined up correctly. These are the two photos that I'm going to use, and I'm going to use two of the journaling cards or layering pieces that were in the kit. These are actually envelopes, and I'm going to use those as mats for the photo. I have two square photos, and I have both of the photos matted on some white cardstock, and then I used the back of my scissors. I usually use the front of my scissors, and you're not supposed to do that, but I didn't want to mess up those scissors, so I did use the back of them to distress those cards that I'm going to be layering the photos on top of, and then I inked the edges with the distress ink in Vintage Photo. And then after I add those mats to my photos, I'm going to attach them down to the strips of paper. And I'm not going to attach them down to the background because I am going to create a mixed media background. And I always like it when I create this part of the layout first with the photos and some of the embellishments. That really helps me to know how to make the mixed media background. Sometimes I'll do it the other way around and I'll start with the mixed media background, and that works too, but this is my favorite way. I have a piece of gessoed white cardstock, and I'm using my pencil to just give me a general idea of where these pieces are going to be on my background, and that will help to guide me as to where to add the mixed media. And I don't know if you just saw that. For some reason, my camera unfocused as I started working on the mixed media background. So I'm very sorry about that. I have heavily edited this part of the video because it is so blurry. I used two Shimmerz paints. One is a Vibez called Here Comes the Sun, and one is a Shimmerz called Bumbly Bee. And I used the packaging technique to apply that color to the background. And then I went back and I added some splatters over the area where I have the color and extended the splatters out a little bit. And then I was thinking I wanted to put a cluster in the upper right-hand corner, so I added a little bit of paint there too. So sorry that was so abbreviated, but I didn't want you to have to watch a blurry video. Now the paint in the background is dry. You could see I went for kind of a messy look in the background with lots and lots of splatters. Now I'm adding some stamping. I'm using an archival ink called Coffee. I used the color Coffee because I wanted the stamping to be a little more subtle than usual. I often will use black, but I thought that for this layout, Coffee would be a better choice. Then I used a few stamps from my stash. I used a rubber stamp that's off to the right of my layout right now. That is a script stamp. And then I added a little of that and then decided I wanted to use another text stamp. That's a stamp that's to the left of my layout now. That's a Prima stamp. And then I also used a Tim Holtz dot stamp. Now I'm adding a little bit of modeling paste to the layout. You're only going to see little touches of this, but that's okay with me. I'm using some Master's Choice modeling paste and some heavy body acrylic paint in white. I mix those two together, and that helps the modeling paste to be more of a pure white. Sometimes it could be a little bit more gray than I would like it to be. I'm using the modeling paste with a stencil made by A Colorful Life Designs, and this stencil is called Grunge Dots. This is getting to be one of my go-to go-to stencils. The openings in this stencil are very tiny, so it adds a nice little bit of texture and not a whole lot of white to the background. Sometimes that's what I'm looking for, and other times I'm looking for something a little bit more bold. I also find that these types of stencils work really well combining with stencils with larger openings and bigger patterns. Next, I added just a few touches of black splatters, and I did that with a Shimmerz color splash called Black Hole. Now I'm attaching down the strips of paper and my photos to the mixed media background. And I know that a lot of people get a little upset when a lot of the mixed media gets covered up. And I totally understand that. It's just something that I kind of accept is going to happen. Sometimes it happens a little bit too much, and I wish that I had used more mixed media on the background, and sometimes I'll even go back in and add a little bit more. But usually I know that that's going to happen, and I'm okay with just little hints of the mixed media peeking through. And especially on this layout where it's this bold yellow color, I don't mind if it's just small areas that are visible on the final layout. I do know that some of you aren't crazy about that, and I hear you. It's just, for me, part of my process. I picked out a whole bunch of embellishments, and I think I end up using almost every one of these embellishments on the layout. I have a lot of the die cut and laser cut pieces, and I also have quite a few of the flowers that we got in the June kit, and I'm going to include those on the layout as well. Now I'm going to start adding the embellishments to the page. When I cut those pieces of paper to mat my photos on, there was a little piece left over from both of the mats. So I took the brown leftover piece and I tucked it in with the photo that I matted in blue, and then I tucked the blue piece behind the photo that I matted in brown. I wanted to include some tickets on the layout, so I layered two of them together, and then I also put a thin tag behind those two tickets on the photo on the left. And then this was such an interesting embellishment. I guess it's a little frame. I first tucked it behind the photo on the right, but I'm going to go back in and make a little bit better use of that embellishment in a little while. And I'm also going to include this green ticket, but that also gets rearranged. I liked the branch embellishment because I thought it went well with these two outdoor pictures, so I put that in between the two photos. And now I'm going to add a banner to the little mini cluster that I have at the top of the page. I had a scrap of an embellishment that I used for another layout, so I cut a fishtail in one end of it, and then I cut the other end to the correct length, and then I attached that down over the yellow mixed media. I had a little hexagon left over from another project, and I thought that it might look nice to make a cluster with the hexagon, this sentiment that says "loved this moment," and also this little brown button. There were a number of titles in this kit, and this one that said "forever," I thought I could use that if I also added the word explore to it, making it explore forever. My older daughter loves to explore. She loves the outdoors. She also likes abandoned buildings and all kinds of cool places, and she usually documents them with lots of photographs, and the photographs are usually pretty cool. She loves this place in Philadelphia called Eastern State Penitentiary, which is an abandoned jail, and if you've been following my channel for a while, you might know that I love to scrapbook those photos and document our trips there. As I mentioned, I'm going to use a number of these really beautiful dimensional flowers on this layout. I have some yellow flowers, and then I also have some tinier white flowers that I'm clustering around the yellow ones. I moved that little mini cluster with the hexagon on it to the opposite side of the strips of paper. I thought that it looked a little bit more balanced on that side. And then I added a whole bunch of butterflies to the layout. I added some to the clusters, and then I also added one underneath the title. I also added some really tiny sentiments that have some cool faux stitching on them underneath the photo on the left. One says "Simply Fabulous," and the other one says "Memorable Moments," and I staggered those a little bit. Then I began rearranging those embellishments that were over the photo on the right-hand side. First, I took that little frame and I cut it into a couple of pieces, and now I have two embellishments. I'm going to put one on the right side and one on the left-hand side of the layout. Now I have most things basically where I want them, so I'm going to start attaching some of the embellishments down. I attach down the sentiments under the photo, and then before I attach down all of these little elements in that hexagon cluster together, I wanted to pop up the sentiment. Just like I did to give the photo some dimension, I use a little bit of adhesive fun foam to pop up the sentiment, and then I did the same thing for the little button because I wanted that to be layered on top of the sentiment, so I had to double up the foam on that little embellishment. I'm also going to pop up the word forever. First, I add a little bit of cardstock to the back of that to reinforce it for when I add the foam to the back. And I know that not everybody likes to add dimension to their pages. You can definitely get more pages in your albums if you keep them all flat, but I just love the way the dimension looks, especially in person. I think that it's nice to see certain areas of the layout, especially the pictures and the title and then some of the embellishments with a little bit more height. I think that it gives a little bit of emphasis to those elements on the page that you pop up and highlights them a little bit. And butterflies are definitely one of those embellishments that I often choose to give a little bit of added emphasis to. And I'm really just thinking about this now, but the butterflies on this layout, they're all a little bit different. I'm used to having some matching butterflies on the page. I really like the way that that looks on this layout because all the butterflies have different colors that go along with the colors in the background. You kind of can't go wrong with butterflies. I'm once again rearranging the cluster on top of the photo on the right. Now I have the ticket going horizontally and that little embellishment I cut from the frame on top of it with a skinny tag to the left of it. Then I moved over to the embellishments on the photo that's on the left-hand side. I put that little embellishment that I cut out of the frame, the second one, on top of the tickets, and then I changed my mind and I put it off to the left, but I am going to put it back on the layout in a little while. Then I added some Distress ink in Vintage Photo to all of the flowers on the layout and also to the leaves that I'm going to add. And I try to be careful just to add a little bit of ink when I ink the edges of flowers, especially when there's a big contrast between the color of the flower and the ink, which there is right now. I don't want to overdo it. Sometimes I've done that in the past, so I try to be kind of light-handed when adding ink to the edges. But I like the way that the inked flowers look, especially on this layout, which is a little bit more rustic than some other layouts that I've made. Then I use some heavy gel medium. I like to use the matte medium, and I attach down all of those dimensional flowers to the layout. And then I continue to attach all of these elements down to the page. I didn't include all of the footage of me gluing every single thing down, but I did go around to each of those floral clusters and attach down both the flowers and any other embellishments that were in the cluster. And this butterfly is the last embellishment I have to attach down to the layout. Now I'm going to add the word explore to the title forever. I'm using these little letters that I had in my stash. I am not sure who the manufacturer is, but these fit really nicely right on top of the word forever, and I like the way they were brown. I used the Distress ink to ink the edges, and I started in the middle with the letter L, and then I put the rest of the letters on either side. And I found that I had another leftover hexagon. I decided to layer that on top of the larger hexagon that was on the page. And now I'm going to add the little piece that I cut out, which actually it looks like a bow. And I'm putting that at the bottom of the photo instead of where I had it before, which was at the top of the photo. Now I'm adding some photo corners to my layout. I used some yellow pattern paper and my EK Success photo corner punch that you can see to the right hand side of my mat. I inked the edges of all the photo corners and I put 2 on each of the pictures. I added another small tag to the top of the photo on the right hand side. I think that helped it to balance out a little better. And now I'm adding some pearls to the layout. These are little self-adhesive half pearls, and I have them in a number of different sizes on this sheet. So I am making use of those different sizes. I'm putting the very, very tiny pearls on top of each of the letters of the word explore. I put a slightly larger size pearl on either side of the word forever, and then I put that same size pearl on the photo corners. I used a larger pearl on the sentiment at the bottom of the layout. And then I also added a couple of pearls to those 2 little embellishments that I cut out of the frame. Now I'm going to stamp the date of my photo. I once again used the Vintage Photo ink for that. I tuck that little tab back into the layout, and this layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope it gave you either some ideas or a little bit of inspiration. In the description box is a link to the My Creative Scrapbook website. You know I love the limited edition kit, but there are also 3 other kits that are available for all different types of scrapbookers. If you're interested, you can order a subscription on the My Creative Scrapbook website. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.